Yeah, you think you're nervous. I don't know.
How many of these have you done?
I don't know, maybe 4 or 5.
Okay.
But never with someone of your
What are you talking
gravity.
about?
So I'm Jack Howell. I'm here with Burt Hara, who to the clarinet world really needs no introduction, but I'm just going to do a quick Cliff Notes version of your bio. Grew up in LA, studied with Yehuda Gilad Mitchell-Lurie, soloed with LA Phil at 14. Went to Northwestern for 1 year with Clark Brody, then 3 years at Curtis with Donald Montanaro. Won principal in Alabama pretty much right out of school.
I actually missed my graduation ceremony to
right out of school. Then you won principal in Minnesota in 1987. You were there 25 years, except for the year where you won principal in Philadelphia, 96?
96, 97. Yes.
Yeah. Chose to go back to Minnesota after a season. Then won associate in LA in 2013, retired from there a year and a half ago.
Yep, that's about right.
Not bad. A lot of us would kind of like a career like that. So now I feel very fortunate that the circumstances put us in the same place at the same time. Because you're very good friends with Ron Samuels, because you have a daughter who lives in Pittsburgh, and because you're retired, when we needed someone to play in our PSO Christmas Pops, you were gettable.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I was a last second replacement. Somebody had a visa issue or something like
Yes,
that.
yes,
something
that's what
else.
happened. But it's a real coup. You're the guest of honor. I've lost track of the number of people in the orchestra who've wanted to get pictures with you. It's wonderful that you're here, and I really appreciate your taking time to talk.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So the question for me is kind of, how'd you get to be you? How'd you get to be Burt Hara? So can you talk us through?
You should talk to my parents about that.
Well, you're, I would guess, a product of an enriched environment?
No, I'm a product of great music school education in the public schools in Los Angeles before, Prop 13 or whatever, and where these programs really don't exist anymore. There were a couple music teachers. Nora Graham was my teacher. One of her daughters was actually a professional horn player. She played in the Houston Symphony and really phenomenal horn player. But she was just a great teacher. I was very lucky. I happened to be given a list in my 5th grade beginning WINS class of teachers in the area, and because she was so well connected. Michael Arnold was my first teacher. He was a student at USC studying with Mitchell-Lurie. Coleman Block was on that list.
Wow.
We got a lot of players in LA who are have really good careers and stuff. Michael happened to live close by. We got along great, and so I studied with him for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then he said he felt like I needed to go on somewhere else. So he recommended that I go to this Israeli clarinet player who was a student at USC.
And how generous, by the way.
Yes.
There are so many teachers who they have a talented kid and they would say, I got to hang on to this one.
Exactly. And he was the opposite. He felt like he felt like I needed to go somewhere else. And it was interesting. So I'm about 12, 13 years old, and he said to me, you'll go and study with Yehuda for a few years, and then after that, I think you should go to Mitchell-Lurie. So it was sort of like mapped out for me.
Yeah.
So I ended up studying with Yehuda, that competition that I wanted to play with LA. I had been studying with Yehuda for about 6 months, and I took the audition, and I was lucky enough to win. And the funny thing was, at the time, there hadn't been a WIN player who had won the competition in many years, and so people were making a big deal about me. Well, then, like 2 years later, another clarinet player, Jeff Almassian, won it, and then Richie Hawley won it, and then pretty soon they realized it was not about me; it was all about Yehuda being this great teacher, and he was a real inspiration. But so I'm like 12, 13, and Yehuda's 23, so he's like basically right out of USC also.
Wow. So what did you play?
I played the Weber Concertino. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm interested in what you're learning, you're practicing, your growth consisted of at this point in your career. Was it heavy fundamentals, or is it learning fundamentals through playing pieces?
Well, I'll tell you this. When I finally left Los Angeles and went to Northwestern, where I was a freshman there, they were very much, it was very structured and very specific on how to play with fundamentals. And I think my fundamentals were pretty okay. They hated my tone there. Marcellus, I remember when I auditioned this blind audition, Marcellus thought I was a grad student with a terrible tone.
Oh.
And so, he talked about all this catch-up ball and everything like that, and very specific about how things are supposed to be, and I had never really thought about it in those terms. So it wasn't necessarily the right place for me at the time. It's one of those things you look back and go, oh yeah, now I know what he meant when he said this, and now I know what he meant when he said this. But at the time, so I think Yehuda was such a musical inspiration for me that it was about trying to capture the essence of the piece. And he's a very different teacher now than he was back then. But the one thing that he did was he was just amazing at he would be really, really critical, but at the same time you left after an hour just feeling like you could do anything. And he still has that gift, and that's something I really, where sometimes a teacher will be very hard, very critical, and you leave and your student might feel a little bit beat up.
Yeah.
And you never felt that with him.
Which is interesting, because John Wigan said the same thing about Marcellus. He said that Marcellus, that he made you feel like you could do anything. That's really interesting. And boy, what a gift. I wish I could.
I remember hearing about Marcellus that he would do things in master classes. Oh, just do this, and you would make some minor adjustment, and magically everything gets better. And Yehuda wasn't necessarily about that. What I liked about Yehuda, his teaching, was that it was more he would plant seeds. He would make you think, and then you didn't necessarily, you always sounded better at the end of the lesson, but it wasn't that instant fix as much as he would get you to think about something, and maybe then you would take that with you, and maybe it doesn't come to fruition for a couple of years.
And that depends so much on you.
I guess.
You have to be receptive and fertile for that kind of thing to work.
Right.
So that's interesting that you say that they hated your tone, because that's one of the things that I've always thought was a real strength. Did your tone change from then to?
Well, so after my freshman year at Northwestern, I went to the Music Academy of the West. I had studied with Mitchell Lurie my senior year in high school, and then I was able to get into the Music Academy of the West for my first and second summers after my first year of college. And I remember after going to Northwestern and trying so hard to work on my sound, and no matter what I did, they say, hey, you sound great, but your tone, I remember the lesson where I said to Mitchell Lurie, I said, I've tried everything, and I can't, it's just like, I'm trying to change my embouchure, trying this and that, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to sing. I'm just going to try and sing. And the moment I changed that attitude, people started telling me they liked my tone.
Interesting.
Yes. And Montanaro really helped me a lot with my tone too. It was a way of spinning the whole bonade, tap your toe concept, and that really resonated with me. And really, Marcellus was talking, and Brody were talking about this. I studied more with Brody than Marcellus. They were talking about this too, but there was something about it that it was different for me. It resonated with me. But it was really when I decided not to work on my tone is when my tone started developing. And then there was also one aspect of playing that I was told when I was at Northwestern was that nothing moves when you play. That when you do it right, nothing moves except one thing. And so when I was trying for hours and hours to play where nothing was moving, it sounded terrible, but I was doing everything everyone was telling me to do. And it's only after you figure out and you're on the other side that you go, oh, well, that's right. If you do it right, hardly anything moves. But if you don't give yourself permission to move, and it has to do with voicing, if you don't give yourself the permission to move, you'll never get there.
Somebody told me that John Brussier said that the immobile tongue is the enemy of music.
Really? That's interesting. I got to ask him that.
Yeah, please do. I've actually tried to find somebody who has his contact information, just because I would love to know that, because it's such an interesting saying.
Yes.
Yes. And that's one of the things that with the voicing, that so much of clarinet playing being about anticipating where it needs to be. And,
Well, part of it also is, I'm a big believer. I used to do a lot of teaching out of that Inner Game of Tennis, Tim Galway book. And it's really, yes, you kind of have to have an approximation, but then it's really about knowing that there's movement, giving yourself permission to move, and then teaching your body to know where it is.
Yeah.
So to explain it, you have to be a little bit more literal, but then after a while, it's really about trusting that your body knows where it is.
So so I'm kind of circling back, because I'm really interested, because there are two different sorts of approaches. For instance, my wife, who is amazing and can play anything, she grew up playing lots of pieces, lots of competitions. She didn't really specifically work on scales and things like that until she got into university. Whereas my approach, or the way I was taught, was much different. It was more, close-a,
Etudes,
Behrman,
scales, yes.
Scales, scales and thirds, just doing all of that stuff. So where
I was more I was more like her, and I was more about repertoire. I didn't play a lot. There's still, I have never played a lot of etude books that people played frequently. It seemed every time I changed school, I was going back to Rose 32, so I was doing that. I did a lot of repertoire. I was very lucky to be in a group that Yehuda coached. It was called the Joyeux Chamber Ensemble. So by the time I got to college, I had already played a considerably more chamber music than many, which I think ultimately helped me in the orchestra. Approaching it more from a chamber music standpoint. I did like the even like Colburn, the chamber music, not Colburn, what's it called? The chamber music competition in Los Angeles, Coleman. And things like that, so I had a lot more experience. We would play wind serenades, woodwind quintets. So that was a real plus. So I remember, for me, I would go to a lesson with Clark Brody, and I would be playing the Stark arpeggio studies. Is that the one where it starts? Is that the one that starts with the two? There's like 2 pages. I remember, and I'd go through 2 pages of an etude, and I'd stop, and he'd say, well, you missed that note, and you missed that note. And I was like, well, I know I missed those 2 notes, but and his whole point was, you had to get to a point that you were so, prepared and complete that because you can't miss when you play in an orchestra. He was right. But I was like, yeah, I know I missed that, but tell me how to play the clarinet, show me this and that. And I was on that one etude for, I think, 6 weeks or something like that, because I'd come back next week and, well, you missed that note.
When I was in New Mexico, the second player there was David Sparks, who was a Clark Brody student and a Marcellus student, and he said that Clark Brody he'd play an etude and he'd miss a note, and Clark would say, "Oh, David," would turn the metronome up a notch.
Right.
And would go until the day was just a pile.
And I would say this, that helped me. If I hadn't had that, I may have been continuing. Well, I was not always the cleanest player, but that was also a very important thing that I needed to hear at that point. But what I wanted to know was, all right, but everyone's telling me my tone sucks. Tell me what I can do about that.
Yeah,
so.
That's a really interesting perspective, because that kind of clear, ringing, old school sound, that was, I would say that's you. Still, yeah, you sound great.
Oh, thanks.
So you've got, I think I got a pretty good idea of what you got from Yehuda, and a little bit of what you got or didn't get from Clark Brody. What'd you get from Montanaro?
Montanaro was amazing at tone production and about really being meticulous about perfect entrances, about singing lyrical, being very vocal in your playing, spinning the sound. A lot of the stuff that we would talk about, what we attribute to Bonad and Tabuteau. He loved Harold Wright's playing, and that was also a model. He very much played similarly to Harold Wright, and really developing that singing sound. He didn't necessarily. Tone was everything to him, but he didn't necessarily talk as much about. He would talk about various exercises to develop tone. But it really, for me, I realized I never had a concept of sound in my head in those early years. And so I had to kind of find my own. Sometimes I remember in high school actually having a disagreement with my band director. Jerry Grant was his name. He was a really fine saxophone player in Los Angeles. He played in the studios and he composed and stuff, really great. And he would talk about my sound and he'd say, well, it's missing a little bit of this edge, which I now realize he was talking about core. And I was like, yeah, but I'm trying to do this, and I had all these words for what I was looking for, but I really didn't have it in my ear. So that being said, many years later, as my tone developed, I remember I had a friend who I played in beginning winds class in elementary school. He was a trombone player, Terrence. And Terrence said, I turned on the radio and I heard this clarinet playing. I'm talking about 15, 20 years later. He goes, that's Burt. And he could recognize me from something. So maybe there was something voice-wise that was familiar. I don't know. Maybe it was just, maybe it was probably luck.
I was studying with Bill Jackson when you were both finalists for Minnesota. So I've known about you for a long time. And I've seen a lot of pictures of you over the years. And one of the things I always thought, what a great smile. You always seem like you always look so happy.
That's what you said at rehearsal the other day.
Yes. You always in your pictures, you always look like you're just beaming. And I know you've had some rough patches, but just the little I know you from the short time we've been playing together, you seem like a genuinely happy person.
I am. I feel like I've had a lot of bad luck in my life, but I feel like I'm so lucky and so blessed about so many things.
And there's a Yale psychology professor named Laurie Santos.
Oh yeah.
And I went to a lecture she gave, and science tells us not that we will be happy when we perform better, but that if we're happy first, we will perform better. Does that resonate?
I don't say, well, I better do something to be happy today, so I'll play a better performance. We're so lucky to do what we do, and the only reason I play the clarinet is I wanted to play the trumpet. My mother says, your brother plays the trumpet. I don't want two trumpets in the house. They have a lot of clarinets play the clarinet. She had no idea the repertoire that we have.
Yeah.
I remember when I met Marsalis for the first time in September of 1980, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to play chamber music. And he looked at me, and he kind of, took a breath, and he said, well, you're going to realize at one point that the great literature, the repertoire for the clarinet's in the orchestra. And he was right. And I've also been really lucky to play, those, half a dozen amazing pieces that we were lucky enough to be written for us. So, when you're playing great music, it's like, how lucky am I to be doing this?
Yeah.
And, so, I don't know. I've been really lucky. How lucky would it be to be 13 years old and to have an opportunity to work with someone who now is considered one of the finest teachers ever?
Yeah, all of your teachers are like everyone else's last teacher.
Yeah, usually. Well, it's funny. Mitchell Lurie, after Yehuda, it's like, he's not yelling at me enough. He's being so nice. And it was just so funny for many years. He's the reason I'm still playing, because I almost quit the clarinet.
Yeah.
And if I had not gone to the music academy after my freshman year at Northwestern, I would have quit the clarinet. I'm pretty sure. But there's so many things as a teacher you realize were the things that came out of his mouth that at the time I thought, God, I wish he'd pushed me more. He was a great teacher and a great human being, and so lucky to have someone like that in my life.
Yeah. So let's talk about auditions for a minute. because from this side of it, it seems like you won pretty much everything. I mean, like anything you wanted. Do you have a process for auditions, or do you have any insight in taking auditions that someone in college might use?
It's a tough question. I mean, different people have different solutions. The first audition was the easiest because there was no pressure on, because no one knew anything like that. I felt the pressure sometimes at future auditions. I was just talking to Ron about this, took the Rochester one-year position that Ken Grant won back in, that would have been 86, like December of 86. And that was my third audition, and that one and the one before that, I didn't practice for it. And I went out there and I fell on my face. I made the finals, but I really did not play well. And it was at that audition, right after, I remember going to my hotel room and looking in the mirror and saying, it's time to put up or shut up. And it's time to, it's sort of like that kid in the class who, I got an A on the test, but I didn't really study. Mm-hmm. The person who has this talent, and they say that because then if they get a B, they can say, but I didn't really mm-hmm. study. So there's a way that it's sort of, you have this exit, emergency mm-hmm. exit, this excuse, this whatever. And it's like, I remember saying to myself, you know what? It's time for me to put up or shut up. Should I be doing this? Because a month after that was the Detroit audition. And I've never worked harder in my life than for that audition. And I technically won the audition, but they didn't hire. It was a no hire. Mm-hmm. And but it was about just really, okay, it's really about that and my level of preparation. We all have moments like that in our lives where it's like, okay, I remember my kids doing Suzuki violin, and there were certain pieces like the Vivaldi A minor that either kids quit the violin after that or they move on. It's sort mm-hmm. of like that challenge that they've got to raise it up a notch, and I had to do that. Similarly, when I auditioned for the Philadelphia Orchestra, I was just gone through a divorce, and I had to just say, no, it's time to turn it on and really see if you can get back mm-hmm. to that.
So what did that consist of, the working really hard?
I remember showing up at the Rochester audition, and I was in the finals, and they said, well, we're going to ask for the last 2 pages. They're going to ask for the last 2 pages of Daphnis. And I was like, I didn't even look at the last 2 pages mm-hmm. of Daphnis. And then I proceeded to go out there, and I messed up all the stuff that I knew well because I was so worried about the Daphnis, and I ended up playing the Daphnis actually really well. I mean, mm-hmm. I had played it. I wasn't sight reading, but I didn't really practice it. I have a weird attitude towards auditions. People look at it like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to do this, you don't have to. One thing I would say, don't try to read the minds of the committee. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that I can do better than anyone else, I cannot be a good impression of Robert Marsalis. I can do the best. This is how I hear the music. Mm-hmm. And if I do my job in the audition, you might say, oh, yeah, that's exactly how it mm-hmm. should be. But that's how and it could be, oh, I never thought of it that way. But yeah, that's how it should be played. The great advantage you have in an audition versus playing in the orchestra, you don't have to worry about the conductor picking the wrong tempo mm-hmm. or the hall or the violins and the brass playing too loud, or the second bassoon being out mm-hmm. of tune, or the second clarinet player rushing, or it's just about you and you can play it. You don't have to worry about, people ask me, do you play the same way in the orchestra as you do in an audition? Well, if the mood of this, for example, the Brahms Third Symphony, you don't want to make it sound like you're playing as loud as you probably have to play it in the orchestra because mm-hmm. you have the chorale playing. It's just you, so you can capture the essence of that mood without necessarily having to push so mm-hmm. much. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah, I always tell to say that an audition is a closed course.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, in some ways, you have more control over these things. And then for me, especially with Ado DeVart in Minnesota, he was a little worried. I was young. I looked like I was 16. I was 24. I had just turned 24 for that audition. And so he would conduct me, and sometimes he was like, I'm worried about his experience. And I remember at the audition, one thing I did was I just looked right at him. I didn't look at my music. I just looked right at him at the audition, and I followed him. And after 10 minutes, he was like, "He's fine. Yeah, he can follow everything." And I didn't necessarily play any differently than when I was looking down at the music, but the fact that he could feel that I was connected to him, that made a difference.
Yeah. So,
did I answer your? I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes. I mean, anything. It's such an individual thing, but the important thing that I got out of it is, I think, why I have my PSO job, is taking the approach that there will be an audition, and at the end of the audition, either I'll have a job or I won't. But the important thing is being able to look in the mirror and know that I did my best.
Yes.
No stone unturned.
Now, I will say this. That is I approach an audition like that. Now, if you go and you're taking audition after audition, and you can't possibly play it any better, and you're not advancing, well, then you might have to change your strat. Fortunately, I didn't ever have to do that. But if you're sort of like a lawyer. If you can't convince yourself of the case that you're arguing, you can't convince anybody else.
Yeah.
So it's not about, well, I'm going to do it this way because they tend to do this in this orchestra. I know he likes so and so and such. So if I do that, then I can only do what I can do, and I can't read their mind.
Right.
So I have to do that. But I was lucky. It's like, okay, I stuck to my guns. This is how I hear things. I have a thing, and maybe I'm wondering if when I was 20, if the people who are now, I'm 62 now, were thinking this. But for me, I think tempo is everything. And I think if you find the perfect tempo for the piece that you're playing, 80 or 90% of your work is done. Mm-hmm. If you find that perfect tempo, it captures the essence of that piece. And that's the one great luxury that you have taking an audition. You have to worry about a conductor doing it at a tempo that you don't necessarily like. I think so much stuff these days is played too fast. Mm-hmm. And it's very impressive on one hand, but it doesn't touch my soul the way. So like I like to pencil in. I think this is the perfect tempo for this piece, because then at this tempo I can capture this mood, and I'll write a word. And I do it all in pencil because you have to you change, mm-hmm. you evolve. I play Mozart faster now than I did when I was in school, the concerto, because I realized I was taking myself too seriously when I was in my teens. So I think tempo is everything, and that's not something, and that came from working with certain conductors who, if every 4 measures it's a different tempo, that to me tells me you didn't know the right tempo. And you remember, like, you'll teach a student and they'll start an etude too fast, and then they get to the hard part and they can't play it, and it's like, well, you should start by maybe looking at this section,
exactly, and
then you'll find but that maybe has more to do with technical challenges, but in a way that holds true, that, well, here's the melody that's coming here. If you think of that tempo and then start at the beginning, it's a different piece.
Right.
And then you go at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, especially like Brahms 3, that's the second movement. I feel like the tempo is dictated not by our solo, it's by the 16ths and the strings.
Right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like the triplets in Beethoven 8. But even like the Brahms Third Symphony, for me, you get the right tempo when you hear the 2D strings playing the opening later on. You're like, yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
And then you try to bring that.
So this may have been the answer to the next question, or the question that I've written, which is, you're now blissfully retired. With the benefit of all that experience, what would you tell your younger self?
Practice more. Figure out reeds. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't even know what I would answer. I don't look back with any regrets. I'm just feel very lucky. You know, I'll have some colleagues talk about a piece that, you know, a war horse that we play that they may, oh my God, I never want to see this piece again. Like, I would love to play the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
You know, when you have to do it twice a day for a month, maybe it gets old. Or, you know, something like Tchaikovsky 4, the New World Symphony. Sometimes people get tired. It's like, I still think they're great pieces of music. The Mozart Concerto, I could play forever. I mean, I just love it.
Yeah.
And the great thing for us is we have such great repertoire that really all you got to do is get out of the way, and you've got such great content there. It's like, there's nothing I can do to make Mozart better than what it is.
Yeah. And I know it's an unfair question. And the reason I know that is because somebody asked me that same question at one point, and I said, because I have my kids, I would not change a thing. I would not tell my younger self anything, because where things are now is exactly, I would not have changed a thing.
That's really well put. Yes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Okay, so now I got an equipment question.
Uh-oh.
We
did pretty well. We went a long ways before we got to equipment.
Yeah. Well, but the question is, now you've played, like Mike has his Bettany that he's just played it forever, and you had a Bettany that you played forever, and there are many examples of great players having a mouthpiece. Stanley Drucker in his Leylande, Harold Wright in his Chiottaville, I think. What is it about that mouthpiece, and do you think you could have had your career on a stock mouthpiece?
That's a good question. I sometimes wondered if the only reason I ever got a job was because of that mouthpiece. I also remember getting the mouthpiece initially, and people said, "Why are you playing that? It's a piece of junk."
Now, how'd you get the mouthpiece?
I got it from, I don't know if I want to say this because he'll be mad at me. I got it from David Newman. So
Is that the 25-year mouthpiece?
Yeah.
It is? Okay.
I was in London for the clarinet clinic. I was actually a ringer for a clarinet choir that Don Ambler put together.
Wow.
And it was Dave.
I remember that. I mean, I didn't play it, but I remember Don Ambler.
Okay, so he had his clarinet choir,
yeah.
And it was great because I went to London. I got to hear
my
Lurie.
first college teacher was part of that choir, Jamie Jameson, who taught at University of Northern Colorado.
I don't remember him.
Because I remember him talking about being on the plane, and then it's like all these Northwestern students just like playing excerpts at each other.
Well, the greatest thing about going out there, so Don Ambler, funded, he paid for the flights of a couple of us to come in and supplement the group. And Dong Jin actually was one of them who worked on my mouthpiece. So at one point, I'll keep this short, he was working on some mouthpieces, and he had Dave Newman's, this Bettany that he had just found. And I played one open G on him. I said, "Oh, that's great." I went to school, by the way, with David Newman.
Yeah.
So you all know this, but David just retired. He was in the San Francisco Symphony for many years. So I called him about a year and a half later. I said, "David, whatever happened to that Bettany?" I said, "It was perfect. I loved it." And he goes, "Oh, it doesn't project. It's out of tune." Yeah, it's like, "You can have it. I'll sell it to you." So he sold it to me for $50.
Yeah.
And I got the mouthpiece, and I remember playing it for some people. I'm showing it, and they played it. And they said, "This is junk. Why are you playing on this?" And then, I think it was 6 months later, I think is when I won, started winning the auditions or advancing and stuff in auditions. And it went from that to suddenly then I'm in the Minnesota Orchestra, and people offer me $1,000, which at the time was a lot. Now I guess people offer $1,000 for mouthpieces all the time. And even by the time now I'm in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and people are like, "Oh, that's the best mouthpiece I've ever played. I'll offer you $10,000 for it." But it was the same mouthpiece that I got, from him. And Dong Jin had worked on it, and it just felt just right. So, the thing about equipment, there was something about, I can't speak for other people's Shadvilles or Caspers or whatever, but as a musician, I would ask it for something. And I would ask it for more. And every time I asked it for more, it gave it back to me. And sometimes I'll play equipment that beautiful sound, great intonation, everything. If I asked it for the same thing, it didn't reward me in any way. So if I never had a mouthpiece like that, why would I ever ask? Because if I'm asking this equipment for that, I mean, that must be what it feels like to play on a Strat versus like a new instrument. That was my experience.
And interesting that it's so individual.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Because that mouthpiece, I mean, for instance, I played Mike's Bettany and I can't play it at all.
So Ron and I were just messing with some equipment, and I'll play on stuff, and it's stuff that is not in great playing shape. And then I go back to my own, and it takes me like 20 minutes to learn how to play it again. It's just a different way of playing. The people in the LA Philharmonic thought my mouthpiece was, they said, I don't know how you can play on this. And the funny thing is, so the person who kind of turned me on to looking for a mouthpiece like this was Donald Montanaro. Yeah. And now I'm sitting in the section with him, and he plays it, and he goes, oh, I could never play on that.
Yeah.
So he did like my mouthpiece.
And it's the same way with Ron. When he was playing on M30D, I went out and bought an M30D because it sounded so good. I couldn't make it work.
Yeah. And people would talk about various people, they would try their setup, like someone like Frank Cohen, I heard, you couldn't even get a sound out. I mean, he would sound great. And so everyone is just set up differently.
Yeah. So maybe the answer is it's kind of both, Maybe you could have had the same career on a stock mouthpiece,
Right.
How am I doing here? I got everything on my list. Now, can you think of any question that I should have asked you?
No, I'm flattered that you asked me any questions.
Absolutely.
Here's what you asked. I'm thinking about that I appear to smile and enjoy what I'm doing. I really do love what I do, and that's the one thing. There were a lot of players who were playing 40 years, and maybe they didn't necessarily play as well as they did in their prime, but one thing, like, I think of someone like Stanley Drucker. Every time I heard him play, he still had the same love and passion and really went for it. Anthony Gigliotti, there was a love there. And to do it, I mean, I did it for 40 years and I retired. To keep up that enthusiasm and love, sometimes you'll see another player who may sound kind of bored, but play well.
And actually that's what first made me think that I needed to talk to you, was how much you enjoy it. Playing second clarinet on a Christmas pop show, you're having fun.
I'm having fun. The only part I wanted to be the old guy and sneak in and not be in my A game anymore and just walk away into the sunset. But it's like, I don't know. I wanted to be more. I was surprised that I was not more anonymous than I was planning to be.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
I mean,
great in some ways and uncomfortable in other ways.
Yeah, it's like
the first person who said hello to me, who I didn't know, said, "Hello, Mr. Hara." I'm not Mr. Hara. That's my father.
Yeah.
But I'm very flattered that you invited me here to do this.
I'm so glad you did, and I'm glad it all worked out that you wound up playing, and I hope you come back lots, and I hope we have another chance when I think of all the stuff that I should have asked you and didn't think about.
No, well, this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And a pleasure playing with you. It's been a lot of fun this week.
It's been great. So, bye.
Bye.